Hello, everybody who's joining us. We'll hold on just for another minute or so to make sure that those who are wanting to join have joined. We're on fairly low numbers at the moment. We're expecting a few more, so bear with us just for another minute, please. Okay, well, the numbers have stabilized at a rather lower number than we were expecting, but more may join later. So if we could switch to the other slide, and I will introduce myself and introduce the meeting. So welcome everybody to what is really a moment of history for the Royal Entomological Society. My name's Richard Harrington, and I'm a trustee of the Society, and I'm chair of its meetings committee. And this is our first ever online international evening meeting. And I'll tell you a little bit about how it came about in just a moment. But first, I just want to spend a couple of minutes introducing the Society to those who are perhaps a little less familiar with it. I think actually that everybody here is a member tonight, and we've got no non-member guests. But even so, you can spread the word about the Society to those who you know who aren't members, and perhaps try to encourage them to join. So we're a UK-based charity with worldwide membership, and we're striving to enrich the world with insect science. And we do this through our meetings, such as tonight, through our 7 international journals, through our free membership bulletin and tenor, our awards and our grants, and our wide range of outreach activities, which includes Insect Week, which is now truly an international event and happens annually. Also through our amazing library, and also through practical conservation work, especially at our own reserve in Gloucestershire. So do spread the word. We're a very friendly and inclusive society, and we do want as many people around the world as possible to join in and give us the benefit of their input whilst they receive the benefits of being a member. So some of the benefits are on the screen in front of you. I particularly want to highlight the fact that students receive their first year of membership free now, which is really, really great. Our student membership is very, very active, and they do gain a lot from the Society, and we gain a lot from the students. And also, very importantly, I want to point out that as from next year, members will have free access to all of the Society's 7 international journals. That's a new benefit and a huge benefit, and I think a very important benefit of membership. Now, on the meetings front, note that this coming Wednesday, we have the 3rd in our series of monthly evening meetings, this one given by Professor Adam Hart on citizen entomology. And knowing Adam, I'm sure there will be quite a strong ant component to his talk, but well worth listening to, well worth registering for that if you haven't done so already. So about this evening, we're trialing the concept of international representatives, and Kimberly Gauci has very kindly offered to be the international representative for Malta, and she got stuck into that role absolutely immediately by organising this meeting really at quite short notice. So Kimberly, I'm absolutely delighted that you've taken this on. I'm very grateful to you. And as I say, this is the first meeting of this kind, so you have become tonight a very important part of the Royal Entomological Society's history. And I'll now hand over to you to introduce tonight's speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, I'm Kimberly. I thank everyone also for joining us tonight. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor David Mifsud. He is Malta's leading entomologist. He has a first degree and master's degree in biology from the University of Malta and a PhD in zoology from Basel University in Switzerland. He was awarded the National Order of Merit for his contribution to entomology in the Maltese Islands and is the current president of the Entomological Society of Malta, and also the founder of the Association of Maltese Apiculturalists. He has described many species of insects that are new to science. As you can see, he's very busy, as he is also an associate professor in entomology at the Institute of Earth Systems and director of the Center of Liberal Arts and Sciences at the University of Malta. I would like to thank Professor Mifsud for being with us tonight, and I am sure his talk will be very interesting. I now hand over to Professor Mifsud. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kimberly, for this introduction. I was not aware of all these things that you've said, but I'm so grateful that I'm here to talk about alien insects of the Maltese Islands. So shall I share my screen?
Yes.
Yes, so let's do this. Okay, exit. So share screen. I think it's this. It should be this one. Yes, here we are. So yes, so my talk will mainly focus on the alien insects of the Maltese Islands. Obviously, I will not be talking of all the alien insects that we have in the Maltese Islands, because in these past 20 years, we had so many introductions that it's impossible to speak on all of them, but I will be highlighting some of them. Let's start something about the Maltese Islands. So the Maltese Islands...
Sorry to interrupt, but could you do a slideshow either by pressing F5 or the play slideshow button at the bottom?
F5.
Or that one, yeah, that one's great. There we go. Thank you.
Is this better?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thanks. So yes, the Maltese Islands, for those who don't know anything about them, they are situated in the central basin of the Mediterranean basin, and in the center of it, they are about 100 kilometers from Sicily and about 230 kilometers from the northern coast of North Africa. In total, it's about 300 square kilometers. There are 3 main islands, but only 2 of them are inhabited. So the bigger island is Malta, the slightly smaller one is Gozo, and then the smallest one is Comino. Comino, there's only one family with they are only two brothers there that live there, you know. The Maltese Islands, probably you also know that they about at the moment the total population is around half a million. And this is this reflects a lot on our daily, because when you compare it, I mean, we have approximately 1,300 people per square kilometer, you know, making the Maltese Islands one of the most densely populated places on Earth, I would say. Despite all this, we still have some places where they are still natural, where we can still find insects, where I can still do my field work, where I can still find new things for Malta and sometimes also new species, you know. So despite all this urbanization, I would say there is still hope for these islands, you know. The fact that they have been isolated for such a long time from mainland Europe and from North Africa makes it an ideal place for endemism, you know. But today I will not be talking about endemism, but I will be talking about all these alien species that end up in the Maltese Islands and manage to establish themselves over here. Something extremely introductory, the impact of alien species. Obviously, they are a major factor to endangering and impoverishment of biodiversity, second only to habitat loss, you know. So it's very important, people, to try our best not to introduce alien species in the new habitats, in the new territories. Why do we call them alien? I mean, we call them alien because wherever they are introduced, they are not native to that particular place, you know. Because of trade, because of commerce, we have many introductions all over the world of insects, you know. However, only a small percentage of these manage to establish in the new environment, in the new territory. Calculations, various publications say that it's only between 10 and 15% of all these introductions will manage to establish themselves and possibly attain pest status, what we call become alien invasive, you know, and they can become also a threat to the environment, you know. Means of introduction of these alien insects, people. So we have two main introductions. We've got what is known as deliberate introductions, which are something that we are going to introduce on purpose, you know. So we can have an insect that is going to be introduced for biological control characteristics of it, you know, or else we are going to introduce an insect for commercial rearing as a food source, gainful income, such as honeybees, you know, as a hobby, you know. So these are all deliberate introductions, you know. But what we have to be extremely careful of and what we have to be extremely aware of are the accidental introductions, you know. And these can actually take place in various ways. So we have agricultural commerce, crops, you know, the floriculture industry, flowers from one place to another, animal feeds, dried fruits, human transport of infected plant material, you know, introduction of trees for embellishment projects, you know, dead wood, which can be used for various reasons, soil. So all these things, you know, can introduce insects with them, you know, and some of these insects may establish in the new territory. Therefore, we have to be extremely careful, very, very careful. I'm going to start my talk by introducing some examples, you know, and I think that the first example that I'm going to talk about is an insect that was introduced in Europe in the 1860s. All right, so we're talking of more than 60 years ago. What I'm going to say about this insect is very important, you know, because the Maltese Islands are surrounded by the sea. The nearest island is Sicily, and it's 100 kilometers away, you know. So as such, people, we are quite protected, you know. I mean, usually insects will not migrate 100 kilometers, you know, to be introduced into new territory. So there must be something, a source of how they have been introduced. So my first example is actually this primitive aphid. It's called the grapevine phylloxera. It's indigenous to to Eastern North America. But as I said before, in the 1860s, it spread throughout the world, you know, and this is a pest of vineyards, you know, and vineyards are important all over Europe, all over the Mediterranean basin, because of the mainly wine production. And once this was introduced in Europe, practically the viticulture industry was almost completely destroyed, you know. So for 20 years, from 1860 till 1880, this was introduced all over Europe, you know, and the viticulture industry was really almost completely destroyed, you know. But what I want here to highlight is that because Malta is actually surrounded by the sea, you know, and probably at that time we also had a very good quarantine system, we managed to keep this pest outside Malta till 1920. So practically 40, 50 almost, we managed to keep this pest out from Malta for almost 50 years. So we had all of Europe with this pest, and the viticulture industry was completely destroyed, and yet we managed to keep this pest away from Malta, you know, for 50 years. What happened then was that there were some Maltese smuggled some vineyards from Sicily. They had this pest on them. They were from Gozo, and within a year, all Gozo and the Maltese islands were then completely covered by this pest, you know. However, this is the point that I want to say, that we managed to keep this pest out for 50 years, you know, for 50 years. Things are not the same these days, absolutely not the same. This is another very important pest, the cotton cushion scale. Its origins this time are Australia. It was noted in California for the first time in the late 1800s, 1868. And it's again, this pest spread all over Europe in a very short time. Yet again, here we managed to keep it out for 40 years, people, for 40 years. Then again, it managed to enter Malta accidentally in 1907. And in less than 2 years, this pest was all over the Maltese island. We still have it here. It's still very common. One thing that was done was that 3 years later, and this was actually done by many European countries and many Mediterranean countries, that a couple of years after the introduction of this insect, we deliberately introduced a ladybird beetle, Rhodalia cardinalis, because we knew that this ladybird beetle was an active predator on the scale insect, and this ladybug, it's still present with us. It found a good environment also, and we still find it all over the Mediterranean basin. Now, let's shift our attention to eucalyptus plantations. So eucalyptus plantations come from Australia, and they have been with us since the Second World War. So after the Second World War, 1940s, there were many embellishment campaigns for rehabilitation programs, more trees, you know, all over the Maltese islands. Don't forget, people, that the Maltese islands are very arid, you know, and government wanted to plant trees, you know. And unfortunately, one of the trees that everyone knew that they grow fast, you know, and you can see results in such a short time. And this is exactly what politicians want were eucalyptus plantations, you know. And we had many of these in the soon after the Second World War. What is very interesting is that many insects which are associated with eucalyptus plantations were not introduced at that time, you know, but they were introduced much, much later, 50 years later, people. And we still don't know the dynamics of all this, you know, we still don't know it. However, I'm going to introduce here some of these introductions, you know, that happened more or less 15 years ago. So we had these two eulopid wasps, you know, they were first noted in the Maltese Islands in 2006. And these two wasps, as you can see over here, they induce galls, plant galls on eucalyptus, you know. One of them induces like button galls on the leaves, whereas the other one induces much larger galls on the midribs, you know, of leaves, you know, as you can see very well in the photos, you know. Two other insects that were not only introduced but became alien invasive were two species of longhorn beetles. So Foracantha semipunctata and Foracantha recurva, you know. These two were noted slightly beforehand, so in the 1990s and in the year 2000. And nowadays they are extremely common because wood-boring insects tend to attack trees which are stressed. Now, eucalyptus plantations require a lot of water, but Malta is a very arid country. So our eucalyptus plantations are stressed, you know, and because they are stressed, there is a more tendency for insects such as these two longhorn beetles to attack and invade their wood and eat their wood and eventually also kill eucalyptus plantations. So this is the situation right now, you know. More recently, people, 7-8 years ago, we also did a survey for jumping plant lice, and we also found two alien species of jumping plant lice, both of them Australian in origin. And nowadays, these are almost present all over the Maltese Islands, you know, almost all over the Maltese Islands. The fauna of the jumping plant lice of the Maltese Islands is very poor. We only have about 25 species, of which 5 are aliens, and 2 of these are the ones that you can see in this picture over here. So Glycaspis brimblacomblei and Blastopsilla occidentalis. The last pest that we managed to find on eucalyptus was something that I found 2 years ago, and it's this Heteropteran bug. Also, it originates in Australia, but nowadays it's almost cosmopolitan in distribution, and now we also found it in the Maltese Islands. So practically in these last 20 years, many insects which are indigenous to Australia and are monophagous or on eucalyptus now shifted their attention to eucalyptus plantations of Europe and the Mediterranean basin. And we also found most of them in the Maltese Islands. Another interesting group of insects, which I have studied for my undergraduate studies at the University of Malta, are whiteflies. You know, whiteflies are represented in Malta by about 18 species, and 4 of these are aliens to the Maltese Islands. I'm not going to talk on all of them, but at least I will highlight just one of them. This one here, the citrus woolly whitefly. This is a whitefly which originates in the neotropicals, and it was introduced in the southern Mediterranean region and also in Malta in the 1980s. In its place of origin, and this is something also which is typical of alien species invading a new territory. So in its place of origin, this whitefly is polyphagous. It means that it is able to feed and complete its life cycle on many different plants which are not related. However, in Malta and in the Mediterranean, so in the place where it was introduced, it has a preference for citrus plantations, so oranges, lemons, and species like this, you know. So we only find it on this cohort of trees. In this slide also, you can see that very small yellowish wasp, all right? It's known, the scientific name of it is Cales nowaki. It has been used a lot as a biological control agent on this whitefly. Practically, this wasp will oviposit an egg in the whitefly puparium or 14-star larva. This egg will hatch inside the puparium. It will eat the puparium from the inside, and a new wasp will emerge from this puparium, and the whitefly that should have emerged will definitely die, you know. So this is extremely good for biological control, and it's extremely good because it is so specific. So this Cales nowaki, this parasitic wasp, is specific to only this particular whitefly, you know. And this is exactly why we should introduce species that are so specific. The other example that I gave you beforehand, the ladybird beetle, Rhodalia cardinalis, it's a predator, and usually predators are not specific in their diet. But this one here is very specific. Another example, people, of an alien species that in its place of origin, it's polyphagous, but in Malta, it's almost monophagous, is this longhorn beetle over here. So this longhorn beetle, scientifically known as Farinata leprosa, no one would have ever thought that it will get introduced in the Maltese Islands, you know. Very often, there are organizations such as the Plant Protection Organization of the Mediterranean, EPO, European Plant Protection Organization. Usually there are organizations who are monitoring all these alien species which are establishing in many places in Europe and in the Mediterranean, and they will notify the respective national agencies in countries of these introductions. However, for this longhorn beetle, no one knew that it could ever get introduced in Malta. What happened here was that in the year 2000, so 22 years ago, we had this introduction in Malta. At that time, I was doing my doctoral studies in Switzerland, and I had this some specimens of this beetle. Some of my friends posted them to me from Malta, and they told me, listen, David, can you please identify this beetle for us? Because it's doing a lot of damage on a particular tree in Malta. And I told them, I'm very sorry, but I've never seen this beetle. It's definitely not indigenous to Malta, and I need to study it in detail in order to understand what it is. And after a lot of study, I managed to identify it. And I found out that it is actually, it originates in Cameroon, in tropical Africa and Central Africa. But we couldn't understand how on earth this beetle, which is 3 inches in length, ended up in Malta. And in Malta, it was killing all the Morus nigra trees, all the black mulberry trees, you know. And then in these last 20 years, we no longer have a single black mulberry tree in Malta, you know. All of them are dead because the larvae of these beetles bores inside the stems of these trees. Some of these trees were archaic, 300 years old, you know, with a stem diameter of almost 1.5 meters, and it's really a pity seeing all these trees dead, you know. We studied exactly what happened, and what happened was that there was an importer. He got logs from Central Africa, and these logs were not debarked, and this beetle was there, you know. It found a good environment here in Malta. It established itself, and it's extremely common over here. And now it is also shifting its preferences on Morus alba also, so white mulberry. In its place of origin, people, in tropical Africa, this beetle is polyphagous. It attacks a lot of different trees, you know, and it's a pest, you know, over there. It's a timber pest. And I am afraid that in the near future, this could also develop preferences to other trees in the Maltese Islands and wherever else it can get introduced in the Mediterranean. Good. This is another interesting beetle. The record for Malta was the second for the Palearctic. So it was first introduced in Madeira in 1996, and then a couple of years later, we found it in Malta, and then we found it in North Africa. It's a very small beetle. Males have those horns on the head. That's why its scientific name, Cornutus or Zognatus cornutus. It's actually a pest of many dried seeds, you know. And nowadays, its origin is North America. And nowadays, it's spread all over the Mediterranean. And we find hundreds and hundreds of specimens of this small beetle. It's about 4 millimeters in length. Another interesting pest that was introduced in Malta in the late 1990s is this small citrus leaf miner. It's actually a moth. Its larvae are so dorsoventrally flattened that they go inside the leaf, you know. They eat the palisade and the spongy mesophyll of the leaf, and they leave this pattern, this mine, a transparent mine. When you have more of them, you know, you have so much damage on the leaf that the leaf is destined to die and fall off. And when you have so much damage, there are all these leaves can no longer photosynthesize. And if the tree, the orange tree, is a young one, less than 7, 8, or 8 years in age, usually it can also kill the tree, you know. What is interesting, people, here is that there are a cohort of parasitic wasps that can actually establish themselves on leaf miners. Usually, these parasitoids are not specific, you know, so whatever is mining the leaf is good for them, you know. Sometimes they are ectoparasitic, sometimes they are endoparasitic. And this is exactly what happened in Malta. I mean, we have many leaf miners which are indigenous, and these have their own cohort of parasitic insects. And with time, many of these parasitoids manage to establish themselves to feed on the citrus leaf miner. And nowadays, after 20 years, we rarely see the attacks of the citrus leaf miner in citrus plantations, especially if these are not sprayed with plant protection products. Where spraying is still ongoing, we still see this damage, we still see this damage, because as soon as you introduce plant protection products, the natural enemies are the first to disappear. A very nice story is the American serpentine leaf miner. It's a fly, scientifically known as Liriomyza trifoli. And what is so interesting for the Maltese Islands is that this small fly of North American origin, in the early 1970s, it was an insect that was of a very special quarantine significance for all of Europe. In the 1970s, in the Maltese Islands, we had a very big industry of chrysanthemum in Mosta, in the northern part of Malta. It was a very, very big industry, and more than 70 people worked in this floriculture industry. But this industry, people, it was completely destroyed because of this insect, So we had flowers, we had contamination of this fly. These were intercepted from Kenya and Malta. The origin was Malta, and practically this whole business of chrysanthemum cuttings from Malta for export in Africa and in Northern Europe had to cease, had to stop completely because of this very small fly, less than 4 millimeters in length, So a big business had to completely cease because of this American serpentine leaf miner. The soldier fly, native to South America, and the story that I want to tell you over here is this, that this fly, it's a big fly, about 1.5 inches in length. This fly was first intercepted in Malta in 1936. So there was this scientific paper of this guy who found one single specimen of this fly. But then no one else could ever find it, until in the 1990s, I started finding it in large numbers. And there is a very nice story here, which is the following. Alien species, when they are introduced into a new territory, so they are coming from Australia, they are coming from Southeast Asia, they are coming from North America, they are coming from South America, in Malta, in the center of the Mediterranean basin, for them, this is a completely new territory, people. So it's not just like that, they get accidentally introduced here and the next day they become alien invasive. No, people, they need time. So if they manage to establish themselves, if they manage to find the right climate, if they manage to find the right host plant on which to feed, they need time to make new interactions with the environment, new interactions with all the fauna and flora that exists in the new territory. And this may take a couple of years, or more years, or less years, it depends on the plasticity of the species. But in so doing, this entity, this species, is literally changing a little bit its DNA so that it can interact much more successfully with the new environment. When this happens, very often this insect becomes an alien invasive, and we can see thousands and thousands of it, and very often this happens also because there are no natural enemies of this alien invasive insect in the new territory, so even for plants, people that are introduced into a new territory, they need time in order to change a little bit their DNA to be in harmony with the new environment. So this is a very nice story, a very nice example. So from the 1930s till the 1990s, this insect probably was in Malta, but in very small numbers, which we entomologists cannot detect, and once then all this interactions and its DNA changes, then it becomes an alien invasive, and everyone then can find this insect over here. Another example is this trips. I've actually wanted to introduce this example because at the moment one of my students is doing a PhD on the trip fauna of the Maltese Islands, and he is in his final year now of his PhD, so he should submit his dissertation in January, and he will have his viva in March. So I wish him luck. His name is Godwin de Gabriele. And this example here, the Western flower trip, again, it's a species which originates in North America, but it's spread internationally and also in Malta in the 1980s. As such, this very small insect, it's only 2 millimeters in length with a very small mouth part. The mouth part is a piercing type of mouth part. It can only insert its mouth part in a cell on the leaf and suck the sap content, and then go to another cell, and you can see there the damage that it can produce on the leaf, However, the most important damage of this insect is that it is able to transmit viruses, and one very important virus is tomato spotted wilt virus. And this virus, it goes viral, once you have the insect in a glass house full of tomatoes, within a couple of days, if you have one infected tomato plant and you have a couple of these insects, in a couple of days, all the tomato plantations, so amounting to 5,000 plants, they will all get infected because of this small insect, So we have to be really careful when it comes to agriculture and agricultural entomology. Another very interesting species introduced in Malta a couple of years ago, less than 15 years ago, is the geranium bronze butterfly. Its origins are in South Africa. It is now all over the Mediterranean, and it's a pest of geranium and pelargonium, You can see there the picture in the middle, the larva, the caterpillar of this butterfly, extremely hairy. And these caterpillars will literally eat the entire plant in a couple of hours, in a couple of hours. And probably this is the most common butterfly in the Maltese Islands right now, because most of our native butterflies are almost extinct or in danger of being wiped out. I'm pretty sure that you all know the story of the red palm weevil, which originated in tropical Asia. It was first intercepted in Spain, and then practically from Spain, it went through all of Europe and many Mediterranean countries, including Malta in 2007, In Malta, it did a lot of damage. We had many palm trees, secular ones, more than 300 years old. And since 2007, this weevil, this red palm weevil, decimated more than 600 palm trees in the Maltese Islands, and the total cost of this is, you cannot give a monetary value for the damage that this weevil did in the Maltese Islands and elsewhere in Europe and islands surrounding the Mediterranean, you know. So we could see all these palm trees, you know, completely devastated because of this insect pest. Now let's move on, if I have a couple of more minutes, to some other tree, ficus. All right, so ficus trees, people, they were also introduced in many countries after the Second World War, mainly Ficus microcarpae, you know, but we also know of another very important ficus in the southern Mediterranean. Probably this is definitely absent in UK because it's too cold there. So figs, Ficus carica. So ficus is a very important plant genus, more than 700 species of ficus. Their main biodiversity is in Southeast Asia, but some of these ficus species have been introduced in many places in the Mediterranean area for afforestation programs, you know. They have been here for 60 years, but the insects associated with them and native to Southeast Asia, we have seen these only in these last 15 years. And probably we have them because of a lot of commerce happening right now. One of them is this very small pteromalid wasp, Josephiella microcarpae, making these button-like galls on the leaf surface, as you can see in the photo. A couple of years ago, one of my students did a survey on all ficus species in the Maltese Islands, and we know now that we have many species of wasps which are important in pollination of these ficus. Very often, people, one species of ficus will have one pollinator, so one insect for that particular species, you know. So if there are 700 species of ficus, there are 700 plus insects, pteromalids, which are pollinators for this ficus. Some of them are also present in Malta and elsewhere, you know. One of them is this one here, actually two of them, and these are important pollinators of Ficus microcarpa. These have been present in Malta for about only 15 years, people. And this coincides with plantlets of this tree that emerge on their own, you know. So we have nowadays, we have trees, Ficus microcarpae trees, you know, young trees that germinate on their own because now the seed has been fertilized by these insect pollinators. You know, before we didn't have them and the trees were never propagated in this way. This one, we know it. I'm sure that you all know it because this is a very important insect and it pollinates figs, you know, the figs that we actually eat in summertime, you know. This is another species, you know, that pollinates another ficus. The ficus here is Ficus rugubinosa, with relatively big fruits eaten by several birds, you know. My last slide, I think, is this one here. Again, this is a species of thrips, which is native to Southeast Asia. And this one, actually here, we have two species, which are almost indistinguishable on morphological grounds. One of them, both of them actually cause galls on ficus. So as you can see in the photo, when they are present on the leaf, practically the leaf will fold on itself, and inside that fold you have many of these specimens, their larvae and eggs, you know. Now, one species, Gynocothrips ficorum, is actually associated only with Ficus atrocarpe, with Ficus microcarpa, sorry, whereas the other one, Ficus Gynocothrips utzeli, is specialized to feed on Ficus benjamina. When one of my students did the survey on all Ficus of the Maltese Islands in 2012, utzeli was not present in Malta. So utzeli is a more recent introduction to Ficorum, you know, because of this association. People, I would like also to let you know that in Malta, we produce this bulletin. It's a yearly bulletin, and much of the information that I have been giving you is actually present in this bulletin. And I was also involved as a researcher on DAISY, delivering alien invasive species inventories for Europe. And in here, you also find so much information on alien species which are invasive to Europe, but also to the Mediterranean basin. And I think that with this slide, I'm going to stop here because I don't want to annoy you anymore with my monotone and with my alien insects in Malta. And I hope that this was an interesting talk. And if you have any questions, please do let me know. Now, please let me know how I will no longer share the screen. So stop sharing. Yes, here we are.
So thank you very much, Professor Mifsud. It surely was very interesting. Now we'll move on to questions. So we have a question by Octavia Bradley.
Yes.
So I'm going to read it out. My PhD research is on an invasive insect species in Antarctica, and from my recent reading, it seems clear many people have predicted that climate change may allow the establishment of non-native species more easily due to the instability of the environment or ecosystem. Do you agree with this? And do you think Malta is at risk of further invasions due to climate change?
Okay. So I didn't use the word climate change because I'm very afraid of it. Climate change is there, it's happening. But in my opinion, we cannot say, listen, we have this insect in Malta because of climate change, you know. I prefer to say that there is a constellation of things which are helping these insects to invade new territories. And for sure, climate change is one of these factors affecting positively all this, but it's not the only factor. I wouldn't say that it's the only factor, but I completely agree with you that climate change is helping in all this, definitely.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question from Iko Andrianto. Apologies if I pronounced your name not correctly. Are there any records of the black spiny whitefly and citrus in the Maltese Islands? If so, does the species count as an alien species as well?
No, not yet. No, not yet. So far, this whitefly was not introduced in the Maltese Islands, but I'm on the look for it.
Okay, so we have another question from Christopher Williams.
Yes.
How successful have the various biological control agents that you mentioned been in Malta?
Yes, they were very, very successful. They were very, very successful, all of them, and all of them are still present till this very day in Malta. So, and as I told you, you know, they are more successful in areas where there is no plant PPPs, you know, plant protection, plant protection products, you know. So in agricultural systems where farmers are all the time spraying, these are ineffective, you know. But where areas where they don't spray, these biological control agents are doing their job extremely well.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question from Fran, our outreach officer. Do you have survey programs and public alerts for particular species of concern in Malta?
Do I have what, sorry?
Survey programs and public alerts.
I'm afraid not really. We don't have this. No, not really. No, not really. So I work very closely with the plant health authorities in Malta. And what we do over there is that we have to make surveys of particular pests which are spreading in Europe. And for the EU, it is very important that we make surveys for a particular pest on a particular plant, so that we assure the EU that these are not yet present in Malta.
Okay, and the last question from Tony Medjvik. Thanks for the talk, very interesting. This is not my current area of expertise, but I worked for MAFF, now DFRA, excuse me, issuing phytosanitation certificates. It was a challenge to keep commercial imports pest-free. How do you manage this in Malta?
Well, in Malta, again, so this is managed by the Plant Protection Directorate, which is part of the Ministry of Agriculture. So we have the system of plant passports, you know, and there is obviously a very big distinction between anything coming from the EU and anything coming from third countries, you know. So things which are coming from the EU, as such, there is no even border inspection posts, you know. You can only inspect not more than 2% of what's coming in, and this is the main reason why many alien species that enter southern Europe will eventually enter also in Malta because of trade, you know. So even though there is 100 kilometers of seawater between Malta and the nearest place in Europe, because of this barrier for trade, many of these things will eventually arrive because of commerce. I hope that I did answer this question correctly.
Okay, and another question from Richard. Have any imported biocontrol agents caused problems with non-target native insects?
Not really, Richard. However, nowadays, to introduce a biological control agents, it's much more difficult than it was 20 years ago, you know. So nowadays, if a country wants to introduce a biological control agent, it needs to make so many tests in glass houses in order to make sure that it is specific on this particular pest and on none of the native insect fauna of that particular place. So that's a very good point, Richard.
Okay, and another question from Fran. Is Malta a site of insect migration routes? I am aware that there is work on this in Cyprus.
Well, I mean, we have migrations of butterflies, you know. Sometimes we have migrations of locusts, you know, but very often these migrations will not continue, you know, further because the insects are exhausted, you know. So about 15 years ago, there was a big migration of Locusta migratoria, and we could see all these locusts, you know, dead on the seashore. They could not further there because of the large distances, you know.
Okay, and Richard would like to ask a question through his microphone. So I will mute myself.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, absolutely fascinating, David. Thank you. It's amazing to see that incredible range of insect alien problems that you've had. I've never been to Malta, and I'd love to go, but I do like to go on holiday where there are plenty of butterflies. So I was rather disturbed to hear that a lot of your native butterflies are now either extinct or endangered, and the geranium bronze has taken hold. I must admit, I've never seen geranium bronze, so it'd be worth it for that. But what do you think is the reason for the trouble that your butterflies are having at the moment?
We really don't know, you know. I mean, I remember 30 years ago, you know, the meadow brown, for example. I mean, we used to go in valleys, and this, I mean, we used to see thousands of it, you know, thousands of it. Nowadays, there is only a very small place in Gozo where you can see a very small population of the meadow brown, you know. Now, the only butterfly that we see in large numbers is the cabbage white, you know. It's a pest, actually. But otherwise, the swallowtail, you know, it also is relatively rare. I mean, we don't see any more butterflies, but this is not only a problem in Malta. I've been talking to many entomologists in the Mediterranean, and butterflies are disappearing, you know. It could be climate change, it could be use of plant protection products. It's not a question that the host plant is not there. The food plant is there, you know. It's not that we destroyed it, you know, it's there. So it's a whole, it's a completely, there must be something, you know, destroying these charismatic species, you know. I mean, but it's not only that, you know, many other insects, you know, we don't see them anymore, you know. Obviously butterflies, everyone wants to see them, sure. Everyone is happy to see them, but many beetles, many other things that were so common in the past are no longer common, or you don't see them anymore, you know.
So the entomologists of Malta are not short of work to do.
No, absolutely.
And so I have two more questions. Second, so. From Tony Matchwick, are there any active citizen science recording activities to monitor insects other than commercially sensitive aliens?
So in this regards, we had one on orchids. We had another one on pollinators, but now this pollinator citizen science we are going to do it March, April, May of next year. It will be much more precise. We are going to do it in 20 different locations in Malta and Gozo, and we hope to engage a lot of citizens out there. Another project that we have, it's one of my postdoc students, actually. We are trying to see climate change and insect habitats, and also here we are going to involve the public using simple apps on the mobiles, you know. And actually we have launched this actually 2 days ago, you know. It's a Marie Curie scholarship, and now we are involving also the public for these surveys.
Okay, very good. The next question: does the loss of butterflies also reflect impacts on the aculeate populations?
On the what? On the
aculeate. I'm not sure exactly if I'm pronouncing it well.
Aculeate bees.
Aculeate. Okay. I don't know. I cannot answer this question. I simply don't know. We need more studies there. We need many more studies. But for sure, it's not a question related to parasitoids or things like that. For sure not.
Okay, so those are all the questions. Thank you very much for being here and for answering all the questions. And I would like to thank everyone who joined us tonight.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me.
Can I just jump back in on behalf of the Society and thank both David and Kimberly. That was really interesting, a part of the world I should know much more about and don't, and I suspect that many other people feel the same way. And it would be lovely to think that perhaps the Royal Entomological Society and the Entomological Society of Malta can get to know each other a bit better. I think that would be wonderful.
Yes.
So, no, it's great to have kicked off our international meetings in this way. And I very much hope that it will lead to more. So thank you both very, very much indeed. Thank you also to everybody who has attended and listened and asked questions. And although I think we've got about 17 people here tonight, which is nice, but I think many more people could potentially benefit from listening to that talk. And David has very kindly allowed us to record it. So I think we'll be able to make it available to others on the website. So you can tell your friends who missed tonight that they will have a chance, I hope, to listen at another time. So very, very many thanks indeed.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So I'm writing my email address here so that anyone interested, because they have been asking me, at um.edu.mt. So yes, here you are. So yes, if you need any clarifications, do let me know. I will answer your emails, and I will be very happy to give another talk next year.
Super. We will take you up on that, I'm sure. Thank you very much. So I think we're there. So I guess somebody has to say good night, everybody. or good morning in the case of our wonderful attendee from Japan.
Wow.
Anywhere else where it's morning. Thank you for joining from all around the world. It's a truly international audience this evening, which is fantastic. Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye, bye, bye all.